Shalom, Chalverim. Welcome, friends. Thank you for coming together this evening in solidarity for Israel. My name is Nicky Spivak. I'm the Executive Director of the Jewish Community Center and Federation of Augusta. More than 1,200 murdered, 3,200 injured, 150 held captive, 5,300 rockets launched, 360,000 reservists called to active duty, young people at a music festival, children hiding in their rooms, parents and grandparents sitting at home on Shabbat, people waiting for the bus, all executed by the hands of those that wish to see Israel and Jews wiped off the face of the earth. We will mourn, we will cry, we will pray, we will remember, but we will not be silent. We gather here to say to those that carried out these cowardly, heinous acts, and to their supporters here in Augusta and around the world, you will not win. You will not scare us into silence. We aren't going anywhere. The Jewish people will not be intimidated in the face of terror. Tonight, we reaffirm that the Jewish community of Augusta and the entire CSRA will do all we can to stand with Israel and help our brothers and sisters who have been affected by this war. When asked if we have any family in Israel, the answer is yes. We have 7 million members of our family there. We are one.
I'd like to begin by reading for you a letter that has come in from our Congressman, Senator Rick Allen. Israel is the United States' strongest ally in the Middle East, and I join all of you in condemning Hamas's foreign and inhumane terrorist attacks on the state of Israel and her people. The senseless acts of violence and horror we have all watched unfold over the last several days show that Hamas's cruelty knows no bounds. Israel has every right to continue defending herself from this act of pure evil, and America must stand with Israel. I've had the distinct honor of visiting Israel on several occasions, and I can say with certainty that the unwavering bond between our two nations will never be broken. That's why I joined a bipartisan group of my colleagues in introducing a resolution expressing Congress's support for Israel. It's more important now than ever to make sure our voices come together as one, that we are using our voices to speak out against evil. As your congressman and as a man of faith, I will continue to stand in solidarity with and pray for the Israeli people. As the Bible says in Genesis, "Now the Lord has said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed." I can say it no more clearly. If we bless Israel, we will be blessed. Let my voice join with yours to support Israel and her people. I wish I could be there with you this evening, but I'm immensely grateful to Rabbi Cyril for organizing tonight's solidarity rally for our Jewish brothers and sisters. We must band together to stand up against this hatred. With all due respect, I'd like to add a little addendum to this letter. Nicky Spivak and his team at the JCCFA have been all hands on deck. Rabbi Lieberman has been a godsend, and my old friend Rabbi Fisher has been right there with us. This has been seriously very much a group effort, so thanks to all of you.
I have remarks from Israel's Counsel General for the Southeast, not Sultan Dadon. Unfortunately, she sends her best, but could not join us this evening. Dear friends, Saturday, October 7th has changed Israel as we know. The brutal terror attack orchestrated by the Hamas terror organization began on Shabbat morning on our Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah. Israelis were in their homes, some still in bed, some on their way to synagogue, and others celebrating the holiday in an outdoor dance party. When a barrage of rockets fired on Gaza into Israel was accompanied by the infiltration of hundreds of terrorists into Israel by land, sea, and air, advancing into Israeli communities near the Gaza Strip. Over 900 Israelis were murdered as the terrorists brutally attacked youngsters who had been partying, civilians in their vehicles and on the streets, and civilians in their homes. Entire communities were attacked and hundreds massacred as the terrorists moved from one house to another, murdering, raping, torturing, and burning down houses with their inhabitants inside. Children were murdered in front of their parents. Babies were beheaded. Parents were murdered in front of their children. Over 130 Israelis, men, women, and children, including babies and toddlers, were taken hostage and abducted into Gaza. Holocaust survivors who had survived hell on earth were faced with another hell in the form of Hamas's barbaric terrorists. These horrific acts were celebrated in the streets of Tehran and the Palestinian territories. The Hamas terrorist organization who committed these war crimes is a branch of the Ayatollah's regime in Iran, which directly finances and facilitates terrorist attacks in Israel and against Israeli and Jewish targets around the world. These heinous war crimes were celebrated: the snatching of babies from their mothers' arms, the butchering of entire families, the execution of elderly civilians waiting for their bus. Rockets continue to be fired from the Gaza Strip, targeting civilians all across Israel. We are at war. A war not by our choice, but one that was forced upon us. The enemy that we face is bloodthirsty and uncontrollable terror groups, devoid of any moral inhibitions, driven by hatred, the desire to harm Israeli citizens, and to destroy the state of Israel. Israel has begun and is preparing for a prolonged military response in order to eliminate the threat posed by Hamas and other terror organizations. We will do everything necessary to protect our country and citizens, as it is the responsibility and duty of any sovereign nation. Israel will act to free the hostages that were kidnapped to the Gaza Strip, to heavily damage the terror infrastructure, and to ensure that we will never see such images again. In these difficult days, Israelis are united in the determination to overcome and to work together to restore long-lasting safety to our country and citizens. We know also that the pain that every single Israeli is feeling today is shared by our brothers and sisters in the Jewish communities around the world. The solidarity and support that we are receiving from Jewish communities around the world, as well as from other communities and many countries and leaders, provide us with much needed encouragement and strength. Especially here in the United States, we know that we do not stand alone. To all of you this evening, I would like to say thank you. Your solidarity and support means so much in these difficult times, and will be much needed in the difficult days ahead. As we face this dark hour, we do so not only in pain, but also with pride. We are proud, strong, and united. Winning this war is not our only option. We will ensure our safety and the safety of our children. That is the promise made with the establishment of the modern state of Israel 75 years ago, and one that we will keep for generations to come. Terror will not prevail. Israel will prevail. I'm Israel. I would like to invite Rabbi Lieberman back to provide some remarks.
Good evening, everyone. In the last month of my first year of rabbinical school in Jerusalem, I was walking with a friend to get coffee between morning classes on King David Street as the sound of the memorial siren blasted for 2 minutes of silence in Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day. For anyone who's been in Israel at that time, on this day that falls on the 27th of the month of Nisan, it's an incredible sound and sight to see. And as we stood on this busy street on that day, as the hustle and bustle suddenly shifted to silence, all but the sound of the siren's pitch, you could see the world around you literally come to a halt. Taxi drivers stopping their cars and stepping outside to place a kippah on their head. Tourists putting shopping bags and cell phones down. The emotion felt is hard to describe and unlike anything I have felt outside of Israel. And yet when I first heard the sound of that siren ring out in the air, I trembled with a sudden fear. Just in the first millisecond of the sound, I remember the other sirens I've heard in the land during the 2 very disparate times I've lived there. The first sirens I heard 7 years earlier as rockets hit as far as Jerusalem in November of 2012. As I was working as a medic with Magen David Dome, the sound was indicative then of the exact opposite of what we heard on Yom HaShoah. It told us not to stand still in a moment of memorial honor for the dead, a unified moment of dark but deep national pride. No, on that November evening 7 years earlier, the sound told us to hide, to take shelter, anything but stand still in unison. 7 years later, those goosebumps on my arms came on Yom HaShoah with an overwhelming sense of pride at the world around us stopping to honor the millions who died in Shoah. But those goosebumps first came from a place of deep-seated fear and panic to seek shelter. One I didn't realize lived deep inside me all those years between living in this holy land. So later that day, when I returned to my apartment in Jerusalem, hours after the siren for remembrance had sounded, I sat down to write a final term paper for a class, an Israel seminar class. Finally shaking the writer's block I'd been experiencing, I wrote the short few lines of the famed Israeli poet that many of you may know, Yehuda Amichai. In his poems, God's Hand in the World, he wrote, "My pain is already a grandfather. It has begotten 2 generations of pains that look like it. My hopes have erected white housing projects far away from the crowds inside me." The work flowed through me after that moment, and I considered the collective trauma of the land of Israel since her inception in 1948. I examined Israel in this project as an undiagnosed patient, to understand her trauma, the collective trauma of the state of Israel. And I refer to Israel this way, according to the feminine grammatical construct of Medinat Yisrael, as we heard in Hatikva, Hatikva Bat Shemot Alpine. So I refer to her throughout as she, many of us know. The project was on terrorism, rhetoric, and inherited trauma in Israel and Israeli society. And with Israel as the patient, I found other researchers and scholars who explored intergenerational and collective trauma, many of us know very well, in Israel, through a similar lens. We found that a theoretical conclusion could be found when looking at Israel's overwhelmingly conflict-related trauma, but it pieced together through multiple systems, as if seen through the scope of internal medicine. Her condition was not just one ailment that afflicted the entire body, but instead we looked at the organ systems that make the body whole, frail and fragile sometimes, and still full of life and energy at others, when the body, to fight for survival, unwilling to give in to any infirmity. I explained that yes, the country was built on conflict, but it was also built on people. Those who were there before it was named, those who came after from the darkest places of the ghettos and concentration camps in Europe, those who lost everything there to make something new in the land of Israel. And for the children who only heard the whispered stories of those places, only ever having known their new homeland, this homeland, the land that was promised to them. And then there were their children who knew nothing firsthand of Auschwitz, but knew that they would inevitably wear a uniform when they turned 18. And finally, the newest, youngest generation of Israeli children with stories of such bright hope and yet still such deep, dark fear. And I felt I learned about Israel's illness and her symptoms, even if deep down I had always known the cause. A few short days ago now, I looked back to see the last words I'd written on that paper. The common narrative of conflict has been part of Israel's national identity. She has known nothing else. It can be argued by such diagnosticians that the collective trauma of the state of Israel isn't real, that it's fabricated to serve political and economic profit and status. But the fact is that rockets are still hitting towns on the country's southern periphery, and sirens still sound all the way to Tel Aviv. And I wrote, Israel is still here. And my eyes filled with tears as I realized all the generations I've written about, this from the survivors in concentration camps to the IDF soldiers and the youngest Israeli children, were among the murdered this past week. I remembered that as much as I had learned from living in the land of my ancestors, our ancestors traveling the land while simultaneously studying it. I thought that although Israel was always a place that knew and would know terror and terrorism, Israel would always prevail and overcome her enemies. And now, once again, Israel is deeply hurt. Her people are in pain, more than ever before in Israel's 75 years as a nation-state for Jewish people. The land's been ravaged again by violence and bloodshed, and we can only call it senseless. How else are we to describe so many innocent lives lost, and their families who will never be the same, extending all throughout the world? Now, once again, Israel cries out to us in anguish. The families still searching for loved ones cry out in their grief, in their despair, in their fear, in their anger, and even in a quiet sense of hope they still carry. 7,000 miles away, we stand with Israel in her pain, as if we were right there. We feel it with those in our Jewish homeland. I am so touched, and I know all Rabbi Sol and Rabbi Fisher and Nikki feel the same about how many people have filled this sanctuary tonight. Showing solidarity by being with us here. The land of Israel won't be the same. We can only do what we can from here to extend our support through whatever means we can, and pray that this new war ends with every passing hour quickly. So as I pass this space to the rest of Augusta's Jewish spiritual leaders, I ask us to reflect on this liturgical poem for healing, for justice, and the hope we hear in Israel's national anthem of the Tikva, that peace may reign again in this holy land. The poem is written to the mothers of Jerusalem by a dear friend, mentor, and professor of mine, Alden Soloway. Mothers of Jerusalem, your wails echo in the hills. Your grief resounds in the valleys. Your prayer rises up into the luminous sky. More fathers and brothers, more sisters and mothers, more children and innocent, lost to the hand of violence, lost to the hand of hatred. How long, oh my God, how long before cruelty ends and peace reigns within these borders, within these walls, within our hearts? How long, oh God, must we open our graves for the lost? God of generations, God of millennia, spread your tabernacle of safety and shelter over our holy city, country. Guard our sons and our daughters. Protect all who dwell within those gates. Let courage and hope ease this fear. Compassion open the souls of the hard-hearted. Joy and gladness return in song and prayer. Steps, just your steps of holiness. Let's say together.
You know why this country has supported Israel for the past 75 years? It's not because of the Republicans, the Democrats, liberals, or conservatives. It's because of the American people. Every survey shows an overwhelming majority of American people support Israel. And that support is there because there's something about the American people that they are able to distinguish right from wrong, good from bad, terrorists from innocent civilians, democracy from tyranny. I keep hearing comparisons from people to the Holocaust that occurred during World War II. And there certainly are similarities. Hamas stated a very clear goal. It is the elimination of the Jewish state. Adolf Hitler did the same thing. He wrote in Mein Kampf about the necessity of going to war with the Jews, and he made his intentions very clear. Both Hamas and the Nazi Party were elected by the people on platforms of virulent anti-Semitism. Both parties promised warfare and destruction. Both parties had a vision of superiority over their neighbors. Hitler wanted Lebensraum, which means living space, for his Aryan supermen. Hamas wants to drive Israel into the sea. Both parties provided plenty of soldiers that were and are willing to die for their cause. But this is not 1938. In 1938, there was no Israel Defense Forces. Now there is a mighty and a majestic one. That makes all the difference in the world. But in some ways, it is 1948 all over again, when there were leaders in the uppermost echelons of the American government, including the Secretary of State, who urged the president not to recognize Israel, saying that such recognition would stand in the way of our friendship with other countries in the region. President Truman, thank God, did not listen to them. Fortunately, he did listen to the words of his advisor, Clark Clifford, who told him, in an area as unstable as the Middle East, where there is not now and never has been any tradition of democratic government, it is important for the long-range security of our country, and indeed the world, that a nation committed to the democratic system be established there, one on which we can rely. The new Jewish state, he said, can be such a place. That's exactly what the Jewish state has been for the past 75 years. Now the world understands what this conflict is and always has been about: the right for Israel to exist. Ever since the complete withdrawal from Gaza in 2005, there's been nothing but terror from that place. Israel knows that it did something that the Turks, the British, Jordanians, the Egyptians, all of whom once ruled Gaza, never did. And that was to give the Palestinians the first sovereign territory ever. We know that instead of using that newfound sovereign territory to build a country with infrastructure and a vigorous economy, the Gazans chose Hamas as their leadership and decided to spend their money on rockets. They didn't build roads, industry, they didn't establish courts or civil society at all. Even the flourishing greenhouses that the Israelis left behind for the Palestinians were destroyed and abandoned. They chose war instead, The excuses, the occupation, the military control, the settlements, baloney. The issue is Israel's very existence. Praise the Lord that we now have an army that we never had the privilege to have for 2,000 years, so that we can tear the ground from under Hamas and get rid of the Iranian proxy on our coast and ensure the safety of southern Israel for decades to come. I'm not a general, so I don't know anything about strategy. I don't know how it works. I don't know if strategy works or doesn't work. I don't know the difference between a missile site and a haystack. I'm not a diplomat. I don't know what the international political effects of what Israel is doing will be, although I'm sure they'll be highly criticized. We're already seeing that. I'm not an economist, so I don't know how this will affect Israel's economy, the jobs of the soldiers, the people who live in southern Israel. What do I know? I'm not a general, I'm not a diplomat, and I'm not an economist, but I am a professional Jew. So I know a few things about Israel, without a doubt. And I want to share a couple of truths about Israel so that you may know them too. First of all, that Israel is morally justified in what it is doing. I have no doubt about that. There are 1 million Jews who live in southern Israel. That's the equivalent of 40 million in the United States. Would America tolerate for a minute a situation in which 40 million of its citizens were bombarded with missiles day after day, week after week, month after month, and not retaliate? Is there a nation in the world that would not do what Israel is doing today? Is there any government in the world which would not allow its people to endure this kind of bombardment with no end in sight and not respond? I don't think so. And so I have no doubt whatsoever that Israel is morally justified responding to this attack in the way that it is, and you should have none either. None. And therefore, your first responsibility and mine in this hour of Israel's danger is to rise to its defense. We do so by gathering this evening, by speaking up on its behalf, and by giving of our means. There are many ways to give. I know that there are a lot of different opinions on how to give. And I know that it looks some people a couple of days ago that this would not be a fundraiser tonight. That's not really our purpose. But there are a great many organizations, Jewish National Fund, the Federation Fund, the Israel Emergency Fund, Friends of the IDF, APAC. You can look in the program, or you're welcome to call me or Nikki for more information on that. But we must stand by Israel in its hour of crisis. And I also want you to know that there's another very worthwhile entity that is local and extremely important. That's the Augusta Jewish Museum, which will open very soon on Telfair Street, but needs your help. And they will offer Holocaust education, as well as teaching folks about Israel, the land, and its people. So please consider remembering the Augusta Jewish Museum too. So there are many things that I don't know, because I'm no expert on the Middle East, on strategy or diplomacy, but there is another thing that I know for sure, that Israel will fight its enemies as carefully and as cautiously as it can, and to the extent that it is humanly possible. It will aim its missiles at its enemies and not at its women and its children. Understand that it's very difficult to do for several reasons. One is that Hamas makes it a point to place its missiles next to the homes of civilians, next to hospitals, inside mosques, next to schools, and it does so because it wants Israel to strike at these places so that it can photograph the wreckage and then tell the world how cruel and brutal Israel is. We're already seeing some of that. And the other reason why it will not be easy to avoid doing damage to civilians is that shooting missiles is not really an exact science, and it never will be. And yet I know in my heart, I know that beyond a shadow of a doubt that Israel will try its best to the extent that it can to avoid doing damage to civilians, to women and children, to hospitals, schools, and mosques whenever possible. You know, my religion requires me to be realistic and not naive. I know that. But my religion also requires me to have hope and to have faith that someday there will be a real peace. My religion requires me to believe that all human beings, even our enemies, are Nivrei B'Tselem. They're made in God's image. And difficult as that may be to wrap our heads around right now, our religion insists that we must. But my religion also requires me to fight back when I'm attacked and to strike hard at whoever strikes out at me. However, my religion also requires me to hold on to that belief that war is not a permanent condition for human beings, and that somehow there can and there will be an end to senseless war and murder. My religion even requires me to torture, if I must, in order to obtain military information that I must have in order to thwart murder. But it also requires me to do it with the greatest of reluctance and the greatest of care, so that I do not become like those against whom I fight. I'll close with a heartbreaking but meaningful story. A pitiful Jew about to be shot to death by a brutal Nazi guard makes one final request. He says, "Allow me to say just a few words before you murder me." His request granted, the Jew begins to whisper quietly. Viciously, the Nazi cries out, "Dirty Jew, what are you saying?" The Jew replies, "I'm thanking God." The guard exclaims, "You wretched creature, you're at my mercy. I'm about to kill you, and your God can do nothing about it. What in the world are you thanking him for?" The Jew answers simply, "I'm thanking God for not creating me like you." This unprovoked massacre in Gaza, perpetrated by Hamas, teaches us much more than just a story of hate. It teaches us to thank God for not creating us like them. And furthermore, it teaches us that we can and we must change parts of the world that still harbor haters and terrorists. And we must do everything in our power to prevent such attacks from ever happening again, and to eradicate such hate and evil from our planet. Make no mistake, my friends, it's an attack on all of us. Yes, the people of Israel and the Jews of the world want peace. The people of Israel and the Jews of the world will not allow Israel to be destroyed. And as evidenced by the crowd here tonight, it's not just the Jews who want peace. All of us stand ready to provide the political, economic, military aid necessary to assure the continued existence of the Jewish state of Israel, our ancestral and eternal homeland. Anyone who thinks that peace will come soon to the Middle East is a naive fool and a dangerous person. But anyone who thinks that peace will never come to the Middle East is a bitter cynic and equally dangerous. We must be careful not to commit either of those errors. Let us stand with Israel. Let us pray and work for Israel. Let us take pride in all that she's done for the betterment of the world. May our strength to resist and our vision to hope be strong. And may God help us to hold on to both. Adonai Ozdemo Yitain, Adonai Yivarech, Adamo Shalom. May God give us the military might and the physical strength that we so desperately need right now. And may God bless us with peace, the peace that we continue to yearn for. may that peace someday come. Amen.
This holy day, our enemies were singing and dancing and reveling in their love of death with their hooks of death, worshiping their God of death. In Deuteronomy, the Torah tells us, "Behold, I set before you today life and good, death and evil. Choose life, so that you and your offspring will live." Few times in modern era has the choice between good and evil, life and death, been so clear. The contrast between the innocent teenagers attending a rally for love and peace and the murderous monsters who butchered, kidnapped, and violated those teenagers. There is no cycle of violence, no reasoned arguments on both sides of the issue, no thorny political polemics to one angle. There is good and evil, life and death. Now, we and all those who call themselves free and enlightened people of the world must choose life or forever bear the stain of their betrayal. When we stand, as if on a mountain peak, surveying the breathtaking landscape of Jewish history, we know this, that those who sought to destroy the people of the covenant gathered dust in the museums of mankind, while Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel, lives. Ancient Egypt is no more. The Moabites have long been disappeared. The Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, and Romans successively strode the stage of world dominion. Each empire played its part, set its lines, and each in turn has gone. But the Jews survived. Yet, yes, we have been wounded, and we're still bleeding as hundreds of families in Israel are praying for the release of their loved ones from captivity, and thousands sit at the bedside of the wounded and maimed. But make no mistake about it, a wounded tiger is a dangerous beast. There are many kinds of power. There's the power of the confident, the safe, and the strong. But there's also power of the wounded, the hurt, and the desperate. Moshe Dayan urged Israel to act like a wounded tiger, unpredictable and desperate, to deter its enemies from attack. Hamas is now putting that old adage to the test. The people of Israel are heirs to the mystic chords of memory, forged in the fires of the crematory of Auschwitz, a memory that will never again allow ourselves to be placed in a position of defenselessness, not ever again. Hamas will soon learn the scale of that miscalculation. A strong Israel may tolerate a belligerent Hamas on its border. A weaker Israel cannot. A safe Israel can spend much time and resources worrying about humanitarian fallout from a Gaza ground war. A more vulnerable Israel cannot. A wounded, weakened Israel is a fiercer Israel. And to those who try to intimidate us, divide us, and weaken our resolve, we are here tonight gathered in unity and resolve to remind you that the Jewish people are a single person with a million faces, a single soul breathing within a multitude of diverse bodies, and each one of us is found all of Israel. What anyone does immediately reverberates to all the rest. If one should fall, all of us stumble. When one does a mitzvah, all of us participate. King David, the ancient Jewish warrior and early monarch, who fought and won many battles some 2,800 years ago, understood that a strong, inspired home base helps his troops on the battlefield and helps achieve victories. It helps them psychologically, and even more so, it helps them spiritually. Because when we study Jewish history, we learn that spirituality and our practical existence are interwoven. And this is one of the goals of our meeting tonight, that we in the CSRA provide a strong home base by standing alongside our brothers and sisters in the Holy Land as they fight for their safety. We are indeed thousands of miles away, and the practical help we are able to offer is limited, besides from what has been mentioned here tonight. But what is in our hands is to be an inspired and motivated Jew. So this Friday evening, tomorrow night, let's light up all of the Jewish homes in the CSRA with Shabbat candles. Candle lighting time is 6:39 p.m. And if you need candles to light, tomorrow I'm supposed to get a shipment of a whole bunch available for anybody for free. EPS delivers, we're in good shape. And when you recite the blessing and welcome the Holy Shabbat into your home, say a short prayer that the captives are returned safe, that the injured is healed, and that peace reign in the Holy Land. And know that this campaign to light up our homes with Shabbat candles tomorrow evening is also taking place in hundreds of communities throughout the world. So let's add our own candles to the millions of other candles being lit tomorrow evening and add powerful energy. This will certainly help our fighters that defend Israel. And one more suggestion. While Judaism is not a superstitious faith, and we observe the mitzvot, commandments, because God wants us to, because it's the right thing to do, still we find that the mitzvah of mezuzah has the power of protection. So let's focus on that mitzvah as well. If you don't have a mezuzah scroll, and of course, it's not the mezuzah case, it's the scroll on the side that matters. So if you don't have a mezuzah scroll, purchase one. Ask your rabbi or a trusted person to direct you where you can get them. Not advisable to just get them off the internet from anywhere. And if you already have a mezuzah for many years on your door, perhaps check it. Make sure that it's still good. Mezuzahs don't last forever. Send it to a scribe to examine it and make sure the writing hasn't faded and the scroll did not deteriorate. So let's get all our homes protected with the mitzvah of mezuzah. And that protection will extend to our brethren in Israel as we are one people. So let me conclude. When you go home, gather your children to you and tell them the story of our people, our history. Teach them our Torah of life. Tell them not to be afraid, that we Jews are resilient and strong. We are never broken. We are now and forever Am Echad B'Lev Echad, one nation with one heart. And tell them that we are Am Yisrael Echad.
Thank you very much, rabbis. Please rise as I invite Maya and Max Mantato to lead us in the prayer for Israel, which is in the prayer.
Our Father in heaven, God, Redeemer of Israel, bless the Savior of Israel, with the promise of redemption. Shield it with your love, spread over it shelter and peace. Guide his leaders and advisors to provide your truth. Help them with your counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy name. Deliver them, crown their efforts with triumph. Bless the land with peace and contentment with lasting joy. And let us say, Amen.
Finally, I'd like to thank Rabbi Fisher, Rabbi Lieberman, Rabbi Cyril for their meaningful remarks this evening and for all that they do in serving our community. Special thanks to AYS for hosting the solemn event this evening. And thank you to all of you for standing here in solidarity with Israel in this very hard week for all of us. Thank you for attending.